My mother died when I was 9 years old. I still remember the smell of her jasmine perfume and the way she hummed softly while cooking. After she was gone, the house felt hollow, as if the walls themselves were grieving. My father tried his best, but grief changed him. He became quiet, distant, and tired in a way I didn't understand at that age. 3 years later, he remarried. Her name was Clara. At first, I thought she was kind. She smiled often in front of my father and spoke gently when guests were around. She bought me a new dress the first week she moved in and said, "We'll be a happy family now." I wanted to believe her, I truly did. But happiness, I learned, can wear a mask. The day my father went back to work after his wedding leave, everything changed. Clara's smiles faded when he wasn't home. Her voice grew sharp, her eyes cold. If I spoke too loudly, she scolded me. If I stayed quiet, she accused me of being rude. Nothing I did was ever right. She gave me chores that never ended, washing dishes, scrubbing floors, folding laundry, while her own son, Mark, sat comfortably watching television. If I complained, she would say, "You live here for free. You should be grateful." When I tried to tell my father, she would interrupt with tears in her eyes, saying I was disrespectful and ungrateful. My father always believed her. Slowly, I stopped talking. At school, I was known as the quiet girl. Teachers thought I was shy, but the truth was, I had learned that silence hurt less than speaking. At home, silence kept me safe. Clara hated noise, laughter, and reminders of the life my father had before her. She especially hated anything that reminded her of my mother. One afternoon, I came home to find my mother's photo frame missing from the living room. I searched everywhere until I found it hidden in a cupboard. The glass was cracked. When I asked Clara about it, she shrugged. "This is my house now," she said. "The past should stay buried." That night, I cried into my pillow, wishing my mother could somehow hear me. Years passed, and the hatred grew more subtle, but deeper. Clara never hit me, never shouted loudly enough for others to hear. Instead, she used words like needles, small, invisible, but painful. "You'll never succeed. No one will ever love you. You're just like your useless mother." Those words stayed with me. When I turned 17, I earned a scholarship to a nearby college. It was my chance to escape, even if just for a few hours a day. I ran home excited, holding the acceptance letter tightly in my hands. My father smiled with pride. Clara did not. Later that night, I overheard her whispering to him, "Why waste money on her education? A girl like her will end up nowhere." Something inside me broke, but something else woke up. For the first time, I realized her hatred was not my fault. I worked harder than ever. I stayed late at college, studied in libraries, and avoided home whenever I could. I found comfort in books and in the quiet belief that my life could be more than this pain. Then, one evening, everything changed. My father fell seriously ill. During those weeks in the hospital, Clara showed a side I had never seen before. Not cruelty, but fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of responsibility. She struggled to manage the house, the bills, and Mark, who had never learned to do anything for himself. And suddenly, she needed me. I cooked meals, I cleaned, I took care of my father, not because she asked kindly, but because my father needed me. And during those long nights, sitting beside his hospital bed, my father finally saw the truth. One night, he held my hand and whispered, "I'm sorry, I should have listened." Tears filled my eyes, but I said nothing. Some apologies come too late, but they still matter. My father recovered slowly, and when he came home, things were different. Clara no longer controlled the house. My father noticed the small things, the way she spoke to me, the way she favored her son, the way fear crossed her face when she realized her power was slipping. She never apologized. Some people never do, but her hatred lost its strength. A year later, I moved out for good. On the day I left, Clara stood at the door, silent. There was no anger in her eyes, only emptiness. I realized then that hatred often comes from insecurity, not strength. I didn't say goodbye to her. I said goodbye to my father, hugged him tightly, and walked toward my future. Today, I am stronger, not because of the love I received, but because of the pain I survived. My stepmother hated me, yes, but she did not destroy me. She taught me something far more powerful, that even in a house without love, a heart can still learn to grow. Living alone for the first time felt strange. My small apartment near the college was nothing special, just a single bedroom, a narrow kitchen, and a window that overlooked a busy street. But to me, it felt like freedom. There were no harsh voices, no constant criticism, and no fear of doing something wrong. For the first few weeks, I kept expecting Clara to appear behind me, pointing out my mistakes. Even when I cooked, I caught myself worrying if the food tasted good enough. Trauma, I learned, doesn't disappear the moment you leave the place where it began. But slowly, life began to change. I made friends at college, real friends, who laughed loudly, shared snacks, and included me in their plans. One of them, Lena, quickly became my closest friend. She was cheerful, confident, and completely unafraid to speak her mind. One afternoon, while we were studying together, she asked casually, "Why do you flinch every time someone raises their voice?" I froze. No one had ever noticed before. I hesitated, but something about her kindness made it easier to speak. For the first time, I told someone everything about my mother's death, Clara's cruelty, and my father's silence. Lena listened quietly. When I finished, she said something that stayed with me forever. "You're not weak for surviving that. You're incredibly strong." Those words felt like sunlight after years of darkness. Meanwhile, things at home were not going smoothly. My father called me often. His voice sounded tired, and sometimes he paused before speaking, as if choosing his words carefully. One evening, he said softly, "Your stepmother and we argue a lot now." I didn't feel happy hearing that. I only felt sad. I never wanted revenge. I just wanted peace. A few months later, my father asked me to visit home for his birthday. My heart tightened at the thought of returning to that house, but for him, I agreed. When I arrived, everything looked the same furniture, the same curtains, the same quiet tension in the air. Clara opened the door. For a moment, we simply stared at each other. She looked older, more tired than I remembered. The sharp confidence in her eyes had faded. "You've changed," she said awkwardly. "So have you," I replied politely. The birthday dinner was uncomfortable but calm. My father smiled more than I had seen in years. Mark barely spoke, busy with his phone as usual. After dinner, while my father rested, Clara called me into the kitchen. I felt my chest tighten, expecting criticism or blame. Instead, she stood silently washing dishes. Finally, she spoke. "Your father respects you a lot now." I didn't know what to say. She continued, her voice quieter than I had ever heard it. "He talks about your achievements, your scholarship, your independence." There was a long pause. Then she said something I never expected. "I didn't like that he loved you so much." Her words stunned me. I thought, if he kept remembering your mother through you, there wouldn't be space for me. She kept looking at the sink, avoiding my eyes. I was afraid of being second. For the first time, I saw her not as a villain, but as a deeply insecure woman. Her confession didn't erase the years of pain. It didn't heal the scars her words left inside me. But it helped me understand something important. Her hatred had never truly been about me. "I never wanted to replace you," I said softly. "I only wanted a family." She didn't reply, but I noticed her hands trembling slightly. That night, before I left, my father hugged me tightly and whispered, "Thank you for coming back." As I walked toward the door, Clara stopped me. "Take care of yourself," she said quietly. It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest thing she had ever offered. Life moved forward after that. I graduated from college with honors and later found a job as a counselor, helping teenagers dealing with family trauma. Every time I listened to their stories, I remembered my younger self, the scared, silent girl who believed she was unlovable. I made sure none of them felt that way. Years later, I received a call from my father telling me Clara had fallen ill. Without hesitation, I visited. When I entered her room, she looked fragile, her once strict posture replaced by weakness. She seemed surprised to see me. "You came," she whispered. "Yes," I said simply. She stared at me for a long moment, her eyes filled with something unfamiliar, regret. "I wasn't kind to you," she admitted. The words were soft, almost broken. I felt my throat tighten. I had imagined hearing those words so many times growing up. I thought they would bring satisfaction or relief, but instead, they only brought sadness for the years we both lost. "I know," I replied gently. Tears slid down her cheeks. "You deserved better." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then I did something that surprised even myself. I held her hand. Not because I had forgotten the past, not because the pain had disappeared, but because holding on to anger would only keep me trapped in that same dark house forever. She squeezed my hand weakly, and for the first time in our lives, there was no hatred between us. Only two imperfect people, shaped by loss, sitting quietly in the same room. Today, when I look back at my life, I no longer define it by my stepmother's hatred. I define it by my survival, my growth, and my ability to forgive without forgetting. Because sometimes the strongest revenge is not hatred. Sometimes it is healing. After Clara's illness, something inside me shifted. I returned to my apartment with a strange calm I had never felt before. For years, my life had been shaped by survival, escaping pain, proving my worth, staying strong. But now, for the first time, I wasn't running from the past anymore. I was standing on my own ground. Work kept me busy. As a counselor, I listened to stories that sounded painfully familiar. Children silenced by adults, love given with conditions, homes that felt like prisons. Every time I spoke gently to them, I felt like I was speaking to my younger self. One evening, after a long day, I met Daniel. He was a volunteer at the community center. Quiet, observant, kind in a way that didn't demand attention. We started with small conversations, mostly about work and books. Over time, those conversations grew longer. He never rushed me, never raised his voice, never made me feel small. That scared me more than cruelty ever had. When he finally asked about my family, I hesitated, but I told him the truth, not the softened version, not the polite version, the real one. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "You didn't deserve any of that, and none of it defined you." I didn't realize I was crying until he handed me a tissue. Love, I learned, doesn't feel like fear. Years passed gently. Daniel and I built a life together, slowly, carefully. We married in a small ceremony. My father was there, smiling with tears in his eyes. Clara was not well enough to attend, but she sent a short message. "I hope you are happy. You earned it." It wasn't warm, it wasn't loving, but it was honest. Not long after, Clara passed away. When my father called, his voice was broken. I went home immediately. The house felt quieter than ever, emptier, but lighter too. As we sorted through old belongings, I found something unexpected in a drawer. My mother's photo. The glass had been replaced, the frame carefully cleaned. I said nothing, but my chest tightened. At the funeral, I stood quietly at the back. People spoke about Clara as a devoted wife, a strict but responsible woman. I didn't argue with their memories. Everyone knows a different version of the same person. Later that evening, my father sat beside me and said softly, "She told me once she regretted how she treated you. She just didn't know how to say it out loud." I nodded. Some people change too late. Some love too quietly. Some wounds never fully close. And that's okay. Before leaving, I walked through the house one last time. The walls no longer whispered fear. They felt like memories, heavy, but no longer dangerous. I placed my mother's photo on the shelf, smiled at it, and whispered, "I'm okay now." Today, I live a peaceful life. I laugh easily. I speak without fear. I love without begging. My stepmother hated me once. That truth will always exist, but it no longer controls me, because the story of my life didn't end in that house. It began the moment I chose myself. Time has a quiet way of softening even the sharpest memories. Years have passed since I left that house, the house where love felt conditional and silence felt safer than truth. Today, my life looks nothing like the one I once endured. Morning sunlight fills my home, laughter comes easily, and peace is no longer something I have to earn. I am a mother now. The first time I held my daughter in my arms, I felt something I had never known before, an overwhelming promise. A promise that she would never question her worth. A promise that my love would never depend on her obedience, her silence, or her perfection. As she grew, I watched her laugh loudly, ask endless questions, and make mistakes without fear. Each time she did, a small part of my past healed. My father visits often. Age has slowed him down, and regret lives quietly behind his eyes. One afternoon, as we sat together watching my daughter play, he said, "I wish I had protected you better." I placed my hand over his. "You're here now," I said. "That matters." We cannot rewrite the past, but we can choose who we become after it. Sometimes, late at night, memories of Clara return, not with anger, but with understanding. I see now that she was shaped by her own fears, her own insecurities. She never learned how to love without competition. That doesn't excuse what she did, but it explains it. I have forgiven her, not because she earned it, not because she asked perfectly, but because forgiveness freed me. In my work, I still meet children who feel invisible in their own homes. I look into their eyes and see the same pain I once carried. And I tell them the truth I needed to hear. This is not the end of your story, because it wasn't the end of mine. My stepmother hated me once. That chapter exists. It always will. But it is no longer the title of my life. The title is stronger. It is about resilience, about choosing kindness without forgetting pain, about building a home where love has no conditions. And every night, as I tuck my daughter into bed and whisper, "You are loved," I know this with certainty. The cycle ended with me.